We are now on lesson 13 of our study of God's roadmap to everlasting life. The title or the topic is Celebrating Victory in Christ. Once we have accepted Christ as our personal Savior, once we have joined His camp, once we are baptized in His truthful teachings, what do we have to do now? Because God said that this gospel has to be preached to all the world as a witness to all nations, in order to give an invitation for everyone who will hear about it or who will know about it to be saved. Of course, they have a choice whether to accept it or not. So what is our function in supporting this ministry that God has given us to do? According to the Bible, what portion of income belongs to the Lord? According to Leviticus 27:30, and all the tithe of the land is the Lord's. The tithe belongs to God. See, we make money, but we should always remember that the reason why we are able to make money is because first of all, we are alive. And secondly, because we are healthy, we have the strength and the energy to do it. And of course, thirdly, we have this brain that God has given us to be able to know how to make money, and so on. And but if not for God, we will never be able to make money. First of all, we won't even be around. So because of that, God said that we should try to remember that we have also some responsibility for the salvation of other people. So the Lord said, in order for this work to go on, the tithe, there should be a tithe in our income, and that tithe should belong to God. What is the tithe? According to Numbers 18:21 and 24, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance. The tithe of the children of Israel I have given to the Levites to inherit. You see, during the time of the Israelites, as you see, you have the 12 tribes of Israel. The other 11 tribes, they have their own jobs, on vacation. Some are farmers, some were businessmen, some were whatever. Some were shepherds, and so on. But there's one tribe that all they do was to dedicate their life serving God, and serving the other children of God. So God said that these people will do, you'll be working, but these people, since they are dedicating their life to my service in order to keep, to be able to maintain the work, God's work on earth, they will be, because they are Levites and they are priests. So they have some families also. They have to support themselves, and they have to support the family. That's why he said we should dedicate 1/10 of our income to be able to take care of these people. The word tithe literally means tenth. The tithe belongs to God. It is His. I have no right to keep it. When I tithe, I am not making a gift. I am simply returning to God what is already His, because He already said that is His even from the beginning. Unless I am returning 1/10 of my income to God, I am not tithing. Where does the Lord ask His people to bring the tithe? According to Malachi 3:10, bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse. So He wants to bring it to the storehouse. Now the storehouse of God's work on earth is the church. He asked us to bring the tithe into His storehouse, into His church. To what does the Lord refer when He speaks of His storehouse? Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and oil, unto the treasuries. Nehemiah 13:2. In Malachi 3:10, God refers to the storehouse as mine house, which means the temple or church. Nehemiah 13:12. Further points out that the tithe is to be brought to the temple treasury, which is God's storehouse. Other texts that refers to the storehouse as the temple treasuries or chambers include 1 Chronicles 9:26, 2 Chronicles 31:11, 12, and Nehemiah 10:37-38. So all of these texts refer to the storehouse of the church. Some have thought that tithing was part of Moses' system of rites and ceremonies that ended in the cross. How does the Bible help us understand that this is not so? And Abraham gave him tithes of all, Genesis 14:20. And in Genesis 28:22, Jacob said, and of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the tenth unto thee. These passages reveal that both Abraham and Jacob, who lived long before Moses' day, tithed their income. We can therefore conclude that God's plan of tithing preceded Moses' law. So the ceremonial laws that ended on the cross were started with Moses, but the tithing was already being taught or being done, being practiced by God's followers even before Moses existed. But didn't Jesus abolish the plan of tithing? He said in Matthew 23:23, Woe unto you, scribes and hypocrites and Pharisees, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. This ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. So this is something that we should not leave undone. It is something that we have to do. On the contrary, he endorsed it. Jesus was rebuking the Jews for omitting these important matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith, even though they were meticulous tithers. He then plainly told them they should continue tithing, but should also be just and merciful and faithful. For what was the tithe used in the Old Testament days? I have given the children of Levi all the tithe in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Numbers 18:21. As I mentioned, the tribe of Levi or the Levites were priests. They have to be supported because that all they do is the work for the Lord. The tithe in the Old Testament days was used for the income of the priest. The Levites work full-time, taking care of the temple and ministering to God's people. So God's plan was that the tithe support the priest and their families. Did God change his plan for tithe usage in the New Testament days? Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait for the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. 1 Corinthians 9:13-14. Those people who preach the gospel should live of the gospel, because if they dedicate their time just preaching, how can they live? They also have families to support. They have children that they send to school, and they have to eat, and they have to travel. He continued it. His plan today is that tithe be used to support those who work solely in gospel ministry. If all people tithe and the tithe were used strictly for support of gospel workers, there would be more than enough money to reach the entire earth very quickly with God's end-time gospel message. So he says, he knows that if everybody will just give their tithe faithfully, that his work of preaching the gospel will be finished very, very soon. or very fast. What starting proposal does God make to people who feel uncertain about tithing? God said in Malachi 3:10, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now herewith, said the Lord of the hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." He says, "Prove me now, and see if I will not pour you out a blessing too big to receive." God is saying, give it a try. It will work, I promise you. You can outgive God. That's true. There are many stories about this, how people have proven that when they tithe faithfully, their blessings were just multiplied so much. Okay, even the money that was coming to them were also multiplied. The church. Some have thought that tithing was part of Moses' system of rites and ceremonies that ended in the cross. How does the Bible help us understand that this is not so? And Abraham gave him tithes of all, Genesis 14:20. And in Genesis, what test did Abraham and Eve fail, which all of us must pass if we would inherit his heavenly kingdom? They took things that God said were not theirs. God gave Adam and Eve the fruit of all the trees in the Garden of Eden except one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:16 and 17. The fruit of the tree was not theirs to eat. They were to leave it alone. Eve said they were not even to touch it. Genesis 3:3. But they did not trust God. But as well with Adam and Eve, He does not take it by force. He leaves it within our reach, but warns, don't take that. It is holy, it is mine. God does not need our money, but He deserves our loyalty and trust. Make God your partner. When I return God's tithe, I make Him my partner in everything I undertake. What a fantastic, blessed privilege God and I partners in. With Him as my partner, I have everything to gain and nothing to lose. It is an awesomely dangerous venture to take God's own money, which He has earmarked for the saving of souls, and use it for our own personal budgets. So if we use our God's money for saving of souls to our own luxurious living or budgets for enjoying life, then it is not right according to God. In addition to the tithe, which belongs to God, what else does God ask for His people? He said, bring an offering and come into His courts, Psalms 96:8. The Lord asks us to give offerings as well for His work as an expression of our love for Him and our thanksgiving for His blessings. So the tithe is already God's. The offering is just also a gift to express our love to God. So on top of the tithe, we even have to express our love also and thanksgiving to Him for all. What is the tithe? According to Numbers 18:21 and 24, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance. The tithe of the children of Israel I have given to the Levites to inherit. You see, during the time of the Israelites, as you see, you have the 12 tribes of Israel. The other 11 tribes, they have their own jobs, own vocations. Some are farmers, some were businessmen, some were whatever, some were shepherds. Did God change His plan for tithe usage in the New Testament days? Do you not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait for the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. 1 Corinthians 9:13-14. Those people who preach the gospel should live of the gospel, because if they dedicate their time just preaching, how can they live? They also have families to support. They have children that they send to school, and they have to eat, and they have to travel. He continued it. His plan today is that tithe be used to support those who work solely in gospel ministry. If all people tithe and the tithe were used strictly for support of gospel workers, there would be more than enough money to reach the entire earth very quickly with God's end-time gospel message. So he says, he knows that. What does the Lord own? If you read Haggai 2:8, it says there that all the silver and gold in the world are mine. The earth and all its people are mine. Psalms 24:1. I said to you earlier that the whole world had been taken by Satan. So Satan is the emperor of the world, but it's not really his. He just took it by aggression. He tried to steal it from God. But it's still God, technically still God, because without God there will be no world, no earth, no people, not Satan. Satan will not even exist because he was also a created being by God. But Satan, through aggression, he came and tempted the earthlings, and the whole world is now under his, was taken over by him. But because of God's love, God set up a camp here, recruited his disciples, and taught the people how they can be saved. So those people who are all lost under the dominion of Satan, they can also be saved if they decide to leave the camp of Satan to go to the camp of Jesus. The Lord owns the world and everything in it. Psalms 50:10-12. But he permits people to use his great riches. He also gives them the wisdom and power to prosper and to accumulate wealth. Deuteronomy 8:18. Even those who don't believe in God, where did they get the wisdom to accumulate wealth? It's still from God, because they were created by God. In return for furnishing everything, all God asks is that we return to him 10% as our acknowledgement of his great investment in our business affairs, plus offerings as an expression of our love and gratitude. So, in return for furnishing us everything, God asks that we return to him 10% only. 10%, and to express our love to him, we can give more according to what we want, okay, according to what our hearts desires. But the 10% is the. How does the Lord refer to people who do not return his 10% and give offerings? He said, Malachi 3:8, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me, but ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. So God calls us, says that we rob him when you do not do this. What does God say will happen to those who knowingly continue to rob God in tithes and offerings? He said in Malachi 3:9, ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. He said, thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall enter the kingdom of God. 1 Corinthians 6:10. Where does the Lord ask his people to bring the tithe? According to Malachi 3:10, bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse. So he wants to bring it to the storehouse. Now the storehouse of God's work on earth is the church. He asked us to bring the tithe into his storehouse. Did God change his plan for tithe usage in the New Testament days? Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait for the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. 1 Corinthians 9:13-14. Those people who preach the gospel should live of the gospel, because what thrilling point does Paul stress about the stewardship of believers in Macedonia? Paul had written the churches in Macedonia asking them to please lay aside some funds for God's people in Jerusalem, who were suffering terribly from an extended famine. The thrilling response from the church in Macedonia described in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 is most heartening. In verse 5 it says that as a first step they rededicated their life to Jesus Christ. In verses 2 and 3, though in deep poverty themselves, they gave beyond their power to give. In verse 4, they urged people to come and pick up their gifts. In verse 9, their gifts followed the sacrifice example of Jesus. If we truly love Jesus, giving sacrificially for his work will never be a burden, but rather a glorious privilege that we will perform with great joy and satisfaction. What does God promise to do for those who are faithful in returning tithes and giving offerings? He said, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, said the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, said the Lord of hosts. Malachi 3:10 and 12. I know somebody who said that when he was not tithing faithfully, he was making lots of money, but all those money just go very fast. He makes so much money at the end of the week, and at the start of the following week, sometimes it's gone. He gets a call long distance call from his relatives, maybe back in the Philippines or somewhere, maybe, if they're from other countries, but this one that I know came from Philippines, and somebody said, somebody is sick here, we need your help. Could you please send $2,000 or whatever? Or the car always breaks down. It always needs repair, even if his car is not, although it's not very new, it's fairly new, it keeps on breaking down. Or the gasoline always gets consumed fast, or there's always something wrong. He always has money to spend it for. But when he started tithing, it seemed like the car was running very far, and sometimes when almost empty, it's still running very far, or reaching a far distance, or it seems like there's not as much expenses as he usually have than before. God promises to, so it's not only, but the most important thing, how about health? Which is better, having a lot of money and being very sick, or even not having money but healthy? You know, there's a story about a queen in England who in her sick bed, because she owns lots and lots of land and properties, but in sick bed she said, I'm willing to give up all of this just to extend my life. What is all of that anyway, if when we die we cannot have them anyway, we cannot carry them with us? God promises to prosper his faithful financial stewards, and they will be a blessing to those around them, to his church. To what does the Lord refer when he speaks of his storehouse? Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and oil unto the treasuries. Nehemiah 13:2. In Malachi 3:10, God refers to the storehouse as mine house, which means the temple or church. Nehemiah 13:12. Further points out that the tithe is to be brought to the temple treasury, which is God's storehouse. Other texts that refers to the storehouse as the temple treasuries or chambers include 1 Chronicles 9:26, 2 Chronicles 31:11, 12, and Nehemiah 10:37-38. So all of these texts refer to the storehouse. Fantastic. Now let us summarize what we have studied. The gospel must be preached to the world. That is in Mark 16:15. That is, God has commanded us to preach the gospel around the world. So therefore, salvation of man depends on the preaching of the gospel, because that's in Mark 16:16. And this is also the last sign, and then the end will come, according to Mark 16:17-18. When the gospel is preached as a witness to all nations, then Jesus Christ will come, and the end will come. But here are the steps in the salvation of man. Romans 10:13-15. Let's listen very carefully. If one calls on God, he will be saved. So if one accepts the teachings of God, then he will be saved. But before he calls, he must believe first in God. But before one calls to God, before one accepts the invitation of God, he first has to ask God. He must call to God. He must know about God. He must have heard of God. Before he goes to God, he must believe first in God. Before he believes, he must hear about God. Before somebody can even call on God and believe in God, he must hear about God. But before he hears, somebody must first preach or teach that person about God. But before one preaches, he must be first sent to preach. The person must be sent to preach. How can you send one if there is no means to care for that person? How can you send somebody to the Philippines, to Africa, to South America, to wherever, if there's no means? So he has to be supported. He has to have some money. He might be able to have some money as transportation, but how about his food? How about his accommodation there? God commands that the preacher must be supported. 1 Corinthians 9:7, 11-14. Paul received wages for his work. 1 Corinthians 11:9, 8, 1-2, 2 Corinthians 9:12. Putting much pressure on the brethren is not right also, 2 Corinthians 9:7. That is why, even me, I go and evangelize and preach, but I don't want to put so much burden, because I'm not a rich man, but I can also afford it when I start saving a little bit out of my pension and whatever I can find. Then, of course, instead of asking the money from brethren, from other people to support me and to provide for my transportation, food, and shelter, and when I go and preach somewhere, I just take care of it myself, because putting burden to the others, if you can afford it, you don't have to anymore. I know that there are evangelists for hire. Now, the reason why they are evangelists for hire is because they cannot afford to do it themselves, so they need the help of people to finance them so that they can go somewhere and evangelize. Some ways of getting funds, which are considered wrong ways of getting funds, is buying lottery. Buying lottery. Oh Lord, I would like to win in the lottery so I could support your work. No, that's wrong according to God. And also, commercializing the gospel is also wrong. And it's also done by many people. They preach the gospel, but actually they're preaching the gospel and asking the support of people, but actually they're putting them deep into their pocket. They're enriching themselves. They live in big mansions and palaces, driving nice cars. But the people who are supporting them, they are very poor. And so what if those people, when they take the money, support those people, help those people also? That would be better. But sometimes they support themselves. They use the gospel to make money. And the right way of supporting the ministry is every man must give according to the blessing of the Lord that he has received from God. Deuteronomy 16:17. One must first acknowledge the following blessings. If we acknowledge the following blessings, we will be able to give with joy. The earth is the Lord's. Psalms 24:1. Silver and gold belongs to God. Haggai 2:8. The beasts and the fowls of the air are God's. Psalms 50:10-11. Our strength comes from God. 1 Timothy, Deuteronomy 8:17-18. We brought nothing in this world. That is 1 Timothy 6:7. Everything we have, we only receive it from God. 1 Corinthians 4:7, Malachi 3:10. We are only stewards of God. Steward must be faithful. 1 Corinthians 4:2. We must give to God his portion, the 10, Leviticus 27:30, Deuteronomy 14:22. This principle was acknowledged by Abraham, Genesis 14:18-20. It was acknowledged by Jacob, Genesis 20:20-22. It was acknowledged by Christ, Matthew 23:23. The tithe is to be used for the support of the ministry. The Lord's portion is for the ministers, Numbers 18:21. So when we give it to the Lord, to the storehouse, God does not take it for himself. He does not need it. But it is used for the ministry. God just wants us to be able to do his work, surviving without depending so much on him. We already depend on him for our health, for our life, and everything. But then he gives us the strength, the power, and energy and wisdom to be able to make money so that we can support his work also, to see, and that is one way of expressing to us how we love him, how we cooperate, how much we love him, and how we cooperate with him. We are to bring the whole tithe to the church. A curse is upon the unfaithful stewards. So these are the instructions of God, that we should support his work, his tithe. I would like to ask you at this point, how many of you would, from now on, would like to support God in this way, in this proper way, acknowledging that God is the owner of everything, including our lives. So we owe everything to God. But God does not ask all of it from us, only a tenth or portion of what God gives us. And 1/10, not of everything, but 1/10 of the proceeds. So if you make $100 and you spend $20 to make it, the proceeds is only what? So you get your capital, you remove your capital, your proceeds is $80. So your tithe will only be 10% of that, which is only $8. And that's fair enough, isn't it? Because God gives us everything. We take back the portion of what we use as capital to find the money. But the capital, the biggest capital is our life, our body, which God gave to us. I would like to pray for you this evening, so God will help you. I would like you to join me here so that we can ask God to help us and give us power to overcome our weaknesses, and to give us also the courage not to be afraid, not and not to worry about if we give a portion of our income to him, because he owns everything anyway, and but to give it joyfully and without regrets. How does the Lord refer to people who do not return his 10% and give offerings? He said, Malachi 3:8, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me, but ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. So God calls us, says that we rob him when you do not do this.